Fans have spent a decade arguing over which program is the best, but that question is meaningless without looking at the systems behind the spectacle. How they work, what they promise, and what they actually deliver. To find the answer, we have to look past the confetti and analyze the three models that define the industry: public voting, company control, and the high-stakes hybrid. Survival shows do not exist solely to entertain television audiences. The rise of these programs across generations corresponds directly with the increasing cost of debuting a group and the desperate need for guaranteed returns on investment. In the early 2000s, companies could debut a group and build a fandom slowly over time. But the modern K-pop economy requires a group to be profitable from day one. A survival show functions as a massive, televised pre-order campaign. It generates a loyal fan base who feels emotionally and financially invested in the members before they have released a single official song. But for this investment to pay off, the entertainment must be high stakes. By placing trainees in high-pressure environments with sleep deprivation, evil editing, and the constant threat of elimination, the producers create a narrative of suffering that demands a payoff. Some show even forces you to participate in the survival through voting and streaming, which builds a psychological bond and possibly a parasocial relationship. So by the time the finale airs, they're stepping into the industry with a solid fan base that is already looking forward to their first release. The survival show exists because it is the most efficient way to turn the trauma of competition into a guaranteed day-one revenue stream. Understanding the financial machinery helps clarify why the best show debate is so fierce. For some, best means the highest television ratings and global conversation. In this regard, the early seasons of the Produce franchise remain untouchable titans, capturing the general public's attention in a way that modern, niche-focused shows rarely do. Look back at the cultural shock of Produce 101, where Pick Me, the show's theme song, became a national anthem. And trainee Kim Se-jong earned the nickname God Se-jong during the show due to her consistently high rankings and all-rounder skills. For others, best refers to the talent level of the final lineup or the ethical treatment of the contestants. Some says the best show is simply the one that felt the most real. This is why fans still defend shows like Stray Kids. Unlike other survival shows where trainees are pitted against each other, the Stray Kids survival was about a preformed team fighting the company to stay together. It redefined the best outcome not as a manufactured perfect group, but as an unbreakable brotherhood. These factors often diametrically opposed to high ratings. We see constant comparisons between the hardest shows and the most successful groups, creating a paradox where the most traumatizing environments often yield the most dedicated fan bases. To determine which system actually works, we have to separate the entertainment value of the show from the viability of the group it creates. If we look purely at cultural impact and immediate explosive power, the public voting system perfected by Produce 101 remains the industry standard. Usually, a K-pop company acts like a private business. They pick the staff, they pick the members, and they launch the final product. But when Produce 101 premiered on the 22nd of January 2016, it flipped the script. They told the fans that they have the power to decide. By letting fans vote, the show turned them into investors. Because they chose the winners, they felt personally responsible for making the group a success. This turned IOI into an instant hit. Even though they were temporary, they were so popular they actually outsold massive permanent groups from the big three. When IOI released Very, 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 it was a victory lap for the millions of national producers who had built the group from the ground up. As their first and only perfect all-kill with the full 11-member lineup, the song served as the ultimate validation for fans who had spent months voting. However, this voting system comes with a fatal instability that became obvious as the format evolved through Girls' Planet 999 and Boys' Planet. While these later iterations tried to refine the formula with global voting apps and stricter auditing to prevent the fraud scandals of the past, the core intention remained. This often leads to a civil war within the fandom. As seen with the debut of Zero Base One, when Zhang Hao became the first foreign trainee to take the #1 spot, it was a cultural earthquake that shattered the K-group, G-group hierarchy. While Zero Base One achieved historic first-week sales with Youth in the Shade, the internal competition between solo stands remains a constant threat to the group's unity. Companies continue to use this system because the hype is addictive, despite knowing the lineup might not be what they actually wanted. While the public voting system gambles on hype, the company-led system prioritizes long-term stability and cohesive team identity. 16, the show that created Twice, serves as the masterclass for this format, where public input was treated as data rather than a mandate. JYP Entertainment allowed the audience to vote, but explicitly retained the right to make the final decision, famously adding 2 members, Momo and Suyu, in the finale who would not have debuted under a pure voting system. This intervention ensured the group had the dance capability and visual balance necessary to survive the grueling 7-year idol contract, prioritizing professional viability over temporary popularity spikes. This decision was controversial at the time, but the result was twice as crazy. They achieved a perfect all-kill with Cheer Up and became a global powerhouse because every member filled a specific, necessary role. This same philosophy echoes in shows like YG Treasure Box, No Mercy, and Win, where the primary antagonist is not the other trainees but the company founder himself. These shows are less about popularity contests and more about performance reviews, testing mental fortitude under corporate pressure. In Win, Team A and Team B were fighting for the very right to exist as YG artists. The villain in these narratives is often the producer, such as Bang Si Hyuk, Yang Hyun Suk, or Park Jin Young, who acts as a gatekeeper, ensuring that the final product fits the company's specific brand identity. While this lack of democratic power frustrates viewers, the track record shows that groups formed this way often suffer less internal fandom war because the hierarchy was established by authority rather than popularity polls. In this context, the best group prioritized longevity, not the group the public wants today, but the one still standing the next 10 years. Recognizing the flaws in both the chaotic public voting model and the rigid company control model, the industry began attempting hybrid systems to balance fairness with commercial viability. Island stands as the most expensive experiment in this middle ground, an intense show with significant psychological pressure, utilizing a complex facility and a mix of producer scores and global voting to filter candidates. It allowed the producers to protect essential talent while still giving fans the sensation of participation. It was an attempt to engineer a group named ENHYPEN that possessed both the technical skill of a curated team and the pre-built fandom of a voting system. The result was a group with immediate global reach, as seen with the explosive success of their first comeback, Drunk Dazed, proving that you can manufacture organic hype. On the other end of the spectrum, Peak Time attempted to fix the system by focusing on redemption rather than discovery, featuring already debuted idols fighting for a second chance. This approach removed the trainee dynamic entirely, replacing the narrative of potential with a narrative of professional desperation and skill. This hybrid experiment reached its most controversial peak with Are You Next? Their show, Are You Next?, promised a middle ground, but the finale revealed the brutal reality. The system was structured so that only 2 members were chosen by the public vote, while the remaining 4 were hand-picked by the label's internal selection process. This effectively meant the company controlled 2/3 of the group, using the public's voting data to measure hype while ultimately overriding the rankings to curate a specific visual chemistry and concept fit. Fans were furious, calling it a rigged hybrid. Yet, the instant global domination of Magnetic suggests that this might be the most effective system of all, one where the fans generate the noise, but the company holds the final decisions. These hybrid shows represent the industry's admission that neither pure voting nor pure curation is perfect. They represent a search for a system where a group has both the fan-driven hype of a survival show and the skill-based stability of a company group. Whatever system is used, the true test of a survival show begins the morning after the finale, when the confetti is swept away and the contracts are signed. For groups born from the produce lineage and its successors like Girls' Planet 999, the reality is often a sprint against a ticking clock. The temporary nature of these contracts creates a burnout pacing, where the group must maximize revenue in 2.5 years. We see this in the grueling schedules of groups like Kepler, where the pressure to stay relevant before the contract expires leads to diminishing returns, which often lead to overworked members and a lack of long-term artistic growth. The disbandment of these groups is always a traumatic event for the fandom, leaving a void that the individual members struggle to fill in their subsequent careers. In contrast, groups from company-led systems like 16 or WHIch enter the market with the expectation of a standard 7-year career, allowing for a slower, more sustainable build. The survival aspect in their history becomes a distant origin story rather than the defining feature of their existence. There was a stark divergence in outcomes. The voting-based groups burned twice as bright for half as long, creating intense but fleeting cultural moments, while the company-led groups often become the pillars that sustain the agency for a decade. The emotional turning point for the fan is realizing that the show they loved was either a launch pad for a career or a countdown to a breakup. To fundamentally change how we grade these shows, we must redefine best by combining outcome, impact, and process. The leaderboard changes significantly. A show that was boring to watch because it lacked drama might actually be the best system if it produced a group with perfect chemistry and no mental health scandals. Conversely, the best show to watch often leaves the participants with scars that hamper their ability to function as idols. Voting-heavy shows dominate our memory because they are designed to be unforgettable television, leveraging high-stakes drama that burns into the cultural consciousness. However, company-led shows dominate longevity because they are designed to be effective recruitment processes first, and TV entertainment shows second. The best system is arguably the one that the audience forgets was a survival show at all, where the group eventually transcends their origin story. When we think of Twice today, we think of their color pop sound and their stadium tours, not the heartbreak of the 16 eliminations. If the most interesting thing about a group 5 years into their career is still about the show they came from, the system failed. As Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote, "What is great in a person is that they are a bridge and not an end." In the world of K-pop survival shows, we often mistake the final lineup for the finish line, the ultimate prize. But in reality, the show is merely the bridge these trainees must walk across to reach the actual battlefield of being relevant. If you look back at the last 10 years, almost every successful group comes down to just two models that actually work, two distinct systems that actually delivered on their promises. For the boy group model, the Produce 101 Season 2 era demonstrated the absolute peak of the voting system's potential. It created WhIch, a group so massive they briefly rivaled BTS and EXO. WhIch was the ultimate proof that public voting could create a national boy group. Before the voting scandal, they were the blueprint for the temporary giant, a temporary contract with 18 months of absolute dominance. It was a chaotic, unstable lightning strike that can likely never be perfectly replicated, but it worked exactly as intended. Maximum impact in minimum time. For the girl group model, the 16 system remains the unparalleled standard for long-term success. By blending public feedback with rigid corporate curation, JYP created a legacy act in Twice. The 16 model worked because it prioritized group chemistry over individual hype. The proof is in the results. They transitioned from the bubblegum energy to the mature dominance. Because the system built them as a permanent team, not a temporary project. These two examples serve as the polarizing north and south poles of the industry. You either choose the nuclear explosion of the voting system or the architectural construction of the company system. Regardless of whether the system is designed by voting apps or boardroom executives, the conclusion is undeniably singular. Every survival show is brutal. For every member standing in the spotlight, there are 90 others who return to anonymity, often carrying the stigma of public failure and the debt of years of training. The systems differ in mechanics, but they share a core lack of empathy. They require young people to cannibalize each other's dreams for the sake of entertainment, turning friendship into a liability and ambition into a weapon. As viewers, we participate in this brutality every time we tune in, justifying it with the belief that we are helping them achieve their dreams. But for the trainees, the survival show is not a game. It is a terrifying, defining phase that demands everything they have, with no guarantee that the industry will love them back. So, which system is actually the best? The answer is that the best system is the one that prioritizes the artist's survival over the audience's entertainment. It is the company-led architectural model, exemplified by 16, because it builds a career rather than just a moment. While voting systems provide a louder debut, company-led systems provide a longer life. The true winners are the ones whose system gave them the tools to remain relevant years after years. The best survival show isn't the one with the most shocking eliminations or the highest ratings. It's the one that builds the strongest bridge. Because in K-pop, the ending of the show is only the beginning. Whether it was the explosive voting power of 101, the global record-shattering debut of Zero Base One, or the strategic curation of Twice, these systems worked because they turned competition into fuel. The best system, then, is the one that allows a group to eventually outrun their origins. In the end, the only real survivors are those who can walk across that bridge, forget the cold social experiments of their past, and stand tall not as a pick, but as a permanent artist.